Everyone loves a good redemption story. Netflix's Eric is a great example of this. I would argue that they are even more interesting than the classic hero's journey, because the process of going from a bad guy to a good guy is a lot harder than just to be the good guy who gets something he wants. Because of its difficulties, it certainly makes for better storytelling, and it's something we should aspire to in our lives always. Who among us, upon self-examination, can claim to be a truly innocent person? And this applies more than ever to our nation, America. So before you smash that unsubscribe button or write that hateful comment, let me explain. Once, in 2018, I was speaking to a gentleman who worked for US immigration, and I'm not sure what we were discussing, but I remember bringing up the news article that the US had once rejected a boat full of Jewish refugees escaping the Holocaust. He immediately dismissed it as propaganda. He did the same thing when I mentioned the US role in the revolutions of South America throughout the 20th century. And I wondered why it is that many people prefer to dismiss all US aggression or mistakes as propaganda or lies. Fast forward to modern times, in which there are TikTok videos defending the behaviors of the 9/11 attackers because, as they claim, the US history of imperialism and aggression is so egregious. Many people on the left absolutely cannot stand America anymore. Some people have even left the country. It seems that, as people, we have lost the ability to conceptualize a place as both good and bad, as something complex. We don't see ourselves very clearly. The mirror just shows one thing or another, but really, we are so much more. I've been thinking about this fact for a lot of years, and it bothers the heck out of me. And then I watched the Netflix miniseries Eric, and it just crystallized for me. People don't realize that they are bad or hurting others until someone does something drastic, and they don't even realize that they can change until that happens. In the case of the show Eric, Vincent, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, is a dissatisfied puppeteer whose son Edgar runs away after taking his abuse for the last time. Vincent, struggling with mental health and substance abuse issues, takes to drinking even more profusely until he starts hallucinating that the puppet Edgar imagined for his show, Eric, is real. In the same way, America and its citizens are haunted by the ghost of our sins made real, not in the form of a hairy puppet vis-a-vis Monster Inc.'s Sully meets a Yeti, but in the form of the information on the internet tearing apart the populace, which is unable to cope. We can't pretend anymore that our sins didn't happen, even if they came before us. Like Vincent throughout the series, we have to face them. Even when they weren't his fault, his parents were much worse. But it's up to him, in the end, to take responsibility, find his son, and heal himself to be a better parent and not scar his kid the way that his parents did. And the setting of the series, New York in the 80s, is a kind of microcosm of America, specifically of how the sins of the past can come back to haunt the present. The whole series is about learning how to be a better parental figure, whether it's the government or a father. The personal intertwines with the political. But before we continue, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I'd like to just take a moment to ask, if you like videos like this one, please consider subscribing to the channel. Every little bit helps. You can like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, your choice. But anyway, let's get back to the video. It's not a discussion. Our nation has made mistakes, and we have often looked the other way because we benefited. Whether it was the founding of the nation, which involved slave labor and genocide, or the internment of the Japanese during World War II, or the mess of wars we have exported more ubiquitously than American corn, or the practices of Guantanamo Bay, the recent wars in the Middle East.
In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, we did some things that were wrong. We did a whole lot of things that were right, but we tortured some folks. We did some things that were contrary to our values.
The list goes on, but that one still haunts me after all these years. More recently, the weapons we keep shipping to Israel. There are so many more things. We could go on, but we would be here all day. These are not a conversation, they are facts. And even if the US wasn't fully culpable for every little thing, to be a good person means to acknowledge one's role in a situation. I'm sorry if you feel that these facts weaken the nation somehow, but without discussing them, it makes it even worse. And I'm sure everyone here understands that when we make a mistake and hurt someone else, it's not a discussion, it's a fact. These are documented evils that our nation committed. And you'll notice that I'm not distancing myself by saying that country, I'm saying my country, because being a US citizen does make me responsible, and that is okay. And please remember, when confronting difficult things, mistakes that we've made, bad things that have happened to us or anyone else, the natural impulse is to run, but that solves nothing. Being an adult and talking it out, confronting, acknowledging, accepting, healing, these hard things are the only path forward. Because as it is so aptly put in the show,
Yeah. Everyone thinks about changing the world. No one thinks about changing themselves.
in Eric, Vincent Anderson, the son of a wealthy New York real estate developer, works as a puppeteer at Good Day Sunshine, a Sesame Street type of TV show, while living with his wife Cassie and his son Edgar in New York. Vincent is outright abusive to his family, his co-workers, and generally just pissed off at the world. He can make everyone hate him, even when he's in a difficult situation. He's not a nice guy. One day, Vincent refuses to walk Edgar to school, too busy fighting with Cassie, and on his way to school, Edgar runs away to escape Vincent's abusive behavior, as well as his constant fighting with Cassie. And so begins the story in the search for Edgar, but unbeknownst to us, Vincent's redemption arc as well. For the first few episodes, we believe that Edgar has been abducted by someone, possibly sold or murdered. During this time, we learn about Vincent, his anger and his issues with his family and his parents. As Vincent copes with feeling helpless, he becomes increasingly distraught and dependent on alcohol. He becomes convinced that if he puts Edgar's idea for a new puppet for the series, Eric, on Good Day Sunshine, then Edgar will come home. In the process of trying to get the puppet on the air, Vincent actually starts thinking that the puppet is real. During this time, Vincent is arrested in connection with Edgar's disappearance, and we learn of the fight Vincent had with Edgar before he vanished. Digging deeper into Vincent's world, we see his childhood of mental illness, how he was controlled through medication by his mother and ignored by his powerful father. As the police search for Edgar, a deeper story emerges, corruption within the police force, as well as another missing child, Marlon Rochelle, whose case has been closed for the last year, despite not having found a trace of what had happened to him. The detective on the case, Michael Adroit, faces many obstacles and wrong turns until he finally cracks both cases. It is obvious why Vincent became a puppeteer, because he sought to control something around him. The world of the puppets on Good Day Sunshine gives him control when his family and his own mental illness made him feel out of control. It's why he is so vehemently resistant to any changes by the network to his show. The character of Eric is a metaphor, representing darkness both internal and external in so many ways. We see how Edgar creates Eric to gain control of his situation when he cannot stop his father's darkness from filling his life and household. Eric also represents Vincent's darkness in Edgar's life, his anger and destructive nature that makes Edgar unhappy. His voice is deep and dark, he curses just as much as Vincent does, and his exterior is gruff. Edgar is, like all artists, an alchemist, turning the pain of one's life into something interesting and beautiful. He feels pain when his parents fight. He feels unsafe in his own home. It's a stressful situation for a child, but he doesn't let it beat him down. As Eric becomes Vincent's hallucination, we see his deeper self that is desperate to find Edgar and angry at himself for driving Edgar away in the first place. Eric demands to be made real, like Edgar's pain demanding to be seen, Vincent's dark side demanding to be seen. All of the things that we hide. It's like Vincent seeing Eric as a manifestation of him seeing his sins for the first time, seeing Edgar's pain for the first time. The puppet coming to life as a hallucination is so much more than just a character that makes the story interesting.
What is it about puppets, Lenny?
They get to say the things that we can't.
As his hallucination, Eric is an effective ghost of the emotions that Vincent is trying to bury inside of himself. Everyone has ghosts, things that we would rather not confront. Even America has them. This story doesn't let anyone off the hook. We are forced to face down everyone's darkness. The main character, Vincent, is the heart of the redemption story, but it's a story of everyone doing better. Because while Vincent is a stand-in for America, the police department and the local government could also be put in the same position. Any person or institution that has been bad, that has hurt people or caused damage, is in a space to be redeemed. As Vincent builds Eric, he feels his own desperation and madness. He is lambasted in the press for losing his son, and his internal anguish continues to grow. He doesn't deal with that feeling, but instead focuses on building Eric, putting together the hair and the face, getting the voice just right, and pitching it to his higher-ups. Once Eric is about to be on the air, Vincent celebrates, thinking that his work is done. The giant puppet that he's been seeing will disappear, and Edgar will come home, and he and Cassie will be happy again, and everything will be okay. So he goes to the local nightclub, the Lux, and decides to dance and do cocaine with a giant puppet that he's hallucinating. It would be a great scene, classic Cumberbatch, if his kid wasn't still missing. The fun of the scene, for me at least, was ruined by the context of it, because this story has no intention of letting Vincent off the hook for his crap so easily. Edgar doesn't see Eric on Good Day Sunshine, and he doesn't come home. Instead, Vincent is fired from the show for his volatility. Eric the puppet is taken by the network, and Vincent is asked by Cassie to leave his apartment because she is pregnant with her boyfriend's child. Vincent is naturally devastated. His anguish only grows from here. He leaves the apartment and goes down to the basement where Edgar used to hang out with the building super George. Vincent sees Edgar's drawings on the wall of the basement and recognizes a map of the city, a map leading to where Edgar may have gone. As he searches for Edgar, Vincent slowly accepts that he was a bad dad, facing his own father and the trauma of that relationship, the struggle of being controlled his whole life by money and medication, his bad feelings about not being able to meet his parents' expectations, and this is where his true journey of redemption begins. Having lost everything including his mind, Vincent travels through the city and down into the subway, a metaphor for his own journey deep inside himself through his own misery and self-loathing over having treated his son like garbage and having lost him. He finds his way to a homeless village underground, unaware that Edgar is there too, hiding out with a young man named Yusuf, whom he followed into the subway because he liked his graffiti. Unfortunately, at the same time, the homeless village is cleared by the local government. In the chaos, Vincent is unable to find Edgar, spotting him only for a moment. He breaks down in tears in catharsis over the horror of what he has done, as Yusuf reveals to Vincent that he has been caring for Edgar for the last few days, and that Edgar willingly followed him down into the subway. As the village is emptied, Vincent fights an invisible Eric, effectively fighting himself and punching the air. It is this meltdown of everything that he has done, all that has happened, that sends him back up to the surface surface. He steals the Eric costume from the network and joins a rally of people in Central Park who are angry about the homeless being pushed out of their underground village. In the end, Vincent never finds Edgar. He simply apologizes to him and begs him to come home. He does so by acknowledging his sins and promising change, and his ordeal of searching for Edgar has pushed him to his limit, and Edgar sees that he is truly serious. By putting on the Eric costume, Vincent is taking ownership of his mistakes, of his darkness. That is the hardest thing for most of us to admit the places where we have messed up and apologize like adults. It requires such a level of humility, of being beaten down and rising to the challenge. Instead, most who face such humiliation choose to slink away in shame and become angrier inside. But Vincent does the necessary emotional labor, and he is rewarded by Edgar coming home. Of course, the story doesn't end there. He starts the process of going to rehab and eventually getting his job back and being able to see Edgar again. On the other side of the story, we have Michael LeDroit trying to solve another missing person case. When Edgar Anderson goes missing, he's covered by the press, and Vincent and Cassie are given a platform on TV to plead with the public and Edgar. But when Marlon Rochelle goes missing, his mother Cecile spends a year pushing the police to get the job done and find either him or his remains. She's not even given a chance to speak about her missing child on television, at least until her lawyer forces the issue. When Edgar goes missing, it ends up being the catalyst for Michael to learn more information about how and when Marlon went missing, and he ends up uncovering a whole governmental conspiracy. Without going into the specifics, basically he learns that Marlon was caught with a deputy mayor in an intimate moment by some dirty vice cops and punished for it. The deputy mayor does nothing to help him as the cops beat Marlon to death, and the crime is covered up by his brother-in-law who runs the sanitation crews for the city. His story ends with his mother demanding that the police and the government do better for the city and for young men like him, while she waits for the sanitation crews to find his remains. It showcases the racial disparities of our system, the discrimination faced by Cecile and her son. But she doesn't give up on the system. She demands justice, because there is still something good there. There is still a kernel of good, of a potentially better world for other boys like hers. Both stories are symbolic of America's failures, both globally and domestically. Our nation has failed in many ways, but it doesn't erase who we are. The same way that Vincent did terrible things to his kid and his wife, America has done terrible things both abroad and to our own citizens. But Vincent's still a good person, and we can still be a good country. We have values in our government that mean something. There are still good people in this country trying to do better every day. I cannot say what atoning for those sins looks like for a nation. I'm just one person. But I think seeing our nation as something like Vincent, it's certainly a healthier place to start from than where most leftists are when it comes to America's sins. And it's certainly healthier than simply leaving something that still has potential. It would be as Vincent leaving Edgar rather than trying to bring him home safe. Just a quick side note, I'm not judging anyone who's left America because of its nonsense. I'm just saying that there is still hope, I think. And it is definitely healthier than every conservative who, in response to every US transgression, either denies it or simply shouts, "America, love it or leave it." And yes, Vincent is just a person. He couldn't possibly inflict all the damage that the US has from the founding of our country through slavery or bombing foreign nations or subverting democracy in the interest of economic gains or out of ideological fears. It's a TV show. But if we look at America from the same lens, we can keep what's good about our nation and work to fix the rest. In the show, we see this in the way that the police department and government are forced to confront their failures around Marlon Rochelle. As the crooked cops and city leaders are brought to account, they face their own pain. The deputy mayor trying to hide the fact that he's gay from the public and his family. The trash men facing their guilt for hiding the body of Marlon Rochelle. The people in the city demand accountability for the homelessness and the police failure on the missing child. And as long as there is one decent cop in the department, one father who is willing to try harder, and one lawyer who is willing to fight the system, then there's hope for everything. We are in that process now. We all hate social media, but it really forces action, and it forces politicians and leaders to be accountable to us. They can't turn back the clock and fix the mistakes of the past, but down the line, it will likely become commonplace to acknowledge and at least apologize for the US role in a variety of horrors, both global and domestic. Because not acknowledging them just strengthens our enemies. Think of how Russia and China use American and Western imperialism to diminish US standing in the international community. Think of how Vincent and Cassie were called at their home and harassed by strangers for letting their kid walk alone to school. The process of this shift has already begun, but it will be a while because for a nation that is hundreds of years old, there's a lot to account for and a lot to fix. But that's okay, because as we adhere more and more to the original values and intentions written by imperfect men, we'll get there. At the end of the series, Vincent says goodbye to his father, unable to forge any sort of relationship with him, because he'll never give up his thieving and controlling ways. He calls a spade a spade. We have Central Park in New York because the people who live there were ordered away, but that doesn't mean that it was right. We have all that we have because of many of the atrocities of the past, but now we can call them what they were, because at the end of the day, that is the only way that we can do better down the line. You don't have to be a perfect person to be a good person. We have all had to own up to our mistakes and apologize in our lives at one point or another. It's interesting to see that Vincent is an old school progressive, sort of Stephen Keaton from the 80s sitcom Family Ties. He's a liberal guy. He hates his father and corrupt city officials and quotes Tolstoy constantly. But in this, he is forced to confront himself. That is so important, because many liberals and progressives will look at the broken world, the broken country, and systems before they look at themselves. Not necessarily to see how they contribute to it, but rather to see how they are broken too in their personal lives. In choosing a liberal character and forcing him to go through a journey of redemption, it punctures the balloon of leftists who love to look externally for issues rather than internally. It forces them to grow empathy for the things that they blame, because everyone, from countries to people, can be major mess-ups. The country has made mistakes. It has been malicious and power-hungry. There is no one person we can blame for all of it. History is complex and nuanced, and to own one's US citizenship means to accept that complexity and do better. It's a question of whether we want to be a leader in the world community, or a bully, or the guy that everyone kicks out of the neighborhood because they can't apologize. Because there is a greater threat coming, and it's not the aliens from the Justice League, or the Upside Down from Stranger Things, or the Fire Nation from Avatar. No, it's Russian and Chinese imperialism, and massive climate change, and the impending digital future. America is being given a choice right now about who we want to be down the line. The only question is what we will do with that choice. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video, you should check out my video on empathy across the aisles, and how I use Batman and the Yellowstone to explain partisan politics in America right now. But if you're looking for something a little more fun, then my Digimon video might be more your speed. Either way, I'll see you in the next one. Bye!